Hi, hello. My name is Cleverly Jones, and welcome back to my channel. Today, we'll be talking about Bad Surgeon, which is currently airing on Netflix. It's a documentary about a surgeon who is known to be a pioneer in his field. So, the surgeon's name is Paolo Macchiarini. Paolo Macchiarini is an Italian thoracic surgeon and former regenerative medicine researcher who is known in his field for research fraud and manipulative behavior. So, starting with episode one, it opens up in New York City. So, Benita Alexandra, she's a journalist and she's doing a story on regenerative medicine. Now, through her research, she found out about Paolo. She found information that Paolo was known to be a pioneer in his field. People actually nicknamed Paolo the super surgeon, and he was known for replacing your windpipe with a plastic windpipe, but taking the plastic windpipe and bathing it in stem cells so that it would work. Benita stated that Paolo was a renegade and a risk taker. So already that's a red flag with Paolo. Another red flag is through meeting with Paolo and getting research for her news story, Benita begins to fall in love with Paolo, and you're not supposed to fall in love with the subject matter of your research. So another red flag. First to receive this experimental surgery was a toddler named Hannah. Throughout doing her research, Benita admits that her and her other coworkers are kind of lusting over Paolo. She admits that he's very charming and he's very handsome. So a lot of the women in her office are fawning over him. Benita talks about riding on a motorcycle with Paolo. How she was intrigued by him, and she equated him to similar to being like George Clooney with his looks and his behavior. So later that night, when they got back to the hotel, she was going to her floor, he was going to his floor, and she said how he was getting out the elevator because his floor was before her floor. And then he stopped the elevator and actually kissed her in the elevator. And she said how romantic that was and how she, began to fall in love with Paolo. So we cut to Christopher Lyles. Now, Christopher has like a growth on his windpipe and he was given 6 months to live. His sister saw a news story done about Paolo. So she reached out to Paolo to see if he could possibly help her brother. And Paolo responded back and said, "Yes, I can help your brother." So that gave her some semblance of hope because, again, Chris was only given about 6 months to live. So Chris and Paolo started to correspond with each other outside of her sister. They developed their own relationship, and Chris decided to go ahead with the surgery. Chris flies to Sweden and he has the surgery done at a hospital called the Karolinska. So we cut to a couple of surgeons, Oscar and Callie, and they found Paolo kind of interesting. He had this air, this type of mystique about him, but they were, intrigued and thought he was a genius also. Karolinska decided to make a clinic around Paolo's procedure because it was so groundbreaking. So all the surgeons there were kind of awe of him. So we cut back to Chris's family. They knew the surgery was risky, but at this point, when you're given 6 months to live, you're willing to try anything. So Paolo gave them a lot of hope. They were hoping that this would help to extend Chris's life. Chris went through 15 hours of surgery, but he did make it through the surgery. So the documentary cuts back to Benita. Benita is still on a love fest. She's totally in love with Paolo. She says how they were in constant contact with each other, which to me is another red flag. I mean, he's a surgeon, so I don't know how he could stay in constant contact with her, but she says he was in constant contact with her. She said they had an exciting and romantic relationship. Benita stated that one of their dates was to Venice. Since Paolo liked to be the center of attention, Benita said that he would exaggerate his stories or tell long tales because he wanted, all eyes on him. But to me, that was another red flag. Benita stated how Paolo flew her all around the world. So we cut back to Chris after the surgery, and Callie said that Chris got an infection around his wound and mucus clots were in his airway, so it was preventing him from breathing. Callie stated it was unusual for someone to have this type of infection so soon after surgery. This caused Chris to stay longer in Sweden, but eventually he came home. But when he got there, he was only out of the hospital for a week and he had to return right back to the hospital. He later passed away. Now, his family, they weren't initially upset with Paulo because they knew the surgery was risky. He also only had 6 months to live. The family took it from the perspective of, if what Chris endured can help another family, they saw benefit of it. So again, this was groundbreaking surgery. So they knew it was a possibility that Chris could pass away because of the surgery. After Chris passed away, Paulo met with his daughter and his mom and his sister. So Paulo seemed to be a very personable person and he made them feel, comfortable. However, eventually surgeons started to question his methods and question the data that he had. So in 2013, Paulo proposes to Benita. Now, he proposed to her around Christmas time, but she said it was very short lived as they didn't get to spend much time together. Paulo left on New Year's Eve. He told her, basically gave her an excuse like, hey, I'm going to have surgery that day, so I'm going to have to leave. And Benita was thinking, who would schedule, surgery then around the holidays? What's going on? Can you tell me, the reason why you're leaving? So then Paulo starts to say that he's a doctor to the celebrities and he is the Clinton's doctor and Obama's doctor. Like he starts to make all this stuff up. But Benita, believes him fully and she takes his word for it and she believes what he says. So next we're introduced to Bassi Lindquist. Bassi is a reporter and he is given some information from a disgruntled professor that Paulo isn't all that he claims to be. This was risky for Bassi's career. You don't go against the Karolinska Institute. So he did his due diligence to make sure that the professor wasn't just disgruntled and mad at Paulo. So Bassi got a chance to meet with Paulo. And during this meeting, Paulo admitted that there have been some adverse reactions and outcomes to the surgery, but he attributed this to the patients already being terminal. So with them already being terminal, of course, you can't predict how they'll, do after the surgery. This makes testing on animals ideal because you can pick a healthy subject. So that way, the surgery that you're performing will work. And this becomes important later on through the episodes because they really question his data and if he has performed this testing on animals before. While working in Sweden, Paulo was doing trials on healthy patients. One of those healthy patients was Julia, and Julia was in a car accident which damaged her windpipe. Although Julia was living a healthy and active life, she still wanted to get back to normal. She was a beautiful dancer and she didn't feel like herself after the accident. So that's where Paulo steps in to help her and to give her a new windpipe. Now, Julia was supposed to be one of Paulo's success stories, but we later find out that Julia has passed away. And that's where the investigation into Paulo's methods and his procedures starts to take off. Well, that was the end of this episode. Stay tuned for part 2. If you have watched this episode and would like to comment, please comment below. Please give me a thumbs up and I'll see you in the next.